The air hangs heavy with heat and the scent of tropical flowers. High above, the Andes Mountains cast long shadows upon the sprawling city below, Medellín, Colombia. In the late 20th century, this vibrant metropolis became synonymous with a name whispered in fear and awe: Pablo Escobar. His rise was meteoric and brutal, transforming him from a small-time smuggler into a cocaine kingpin who held a nation hostage. His empire, built on cocaine bricks and blood money, reached every corner of the globe, leaving devastation in its wake. This is the story of how ruthless ambition and insatiable demand for narcotics corrupted dreams and shattered a nation's soul. Born into poverty in rural Colombia, Pablo Escobar's early life was a far cry from the extravagant excess that would come to define his reign.
I hustled on the streets of Medellín, a cunning and ambitious youth with a hunger for more than my meager surroundings could offer.
His early ventures into petty crime hinted at the audacity that would later characterize his rise to power. The burgeoning drug trade of the 1970s offered Escobar an opportunity to seize control and amass wealth beyond his wildest dreams. His ruthlessness and business acumen quickly propelled him through the ranks of Medellín's criminal underworld. Escobar's strategic brilliance lay in his ability to control every aspect of the cocaine trade, from the coca fields of Colombia to the streets of Miami and beyond. Cocaine, dubbed white gold, became the fuel that ignited Escobar's meteoric rise. As demand for the drug exploded in the United States and Europe, Escobar capitalized on the insatiable appetite, transforming himself from a local criminal into a global player. His wealth grew exponentially, exceeding even the wildest imaginations. Escobar's cartel operated with ruthless efficiency, employing a vast network of pilots, smugglers, and corrupt officials. He bribed politicians and law enforcement, ensuring his operations continued unabated. Those who dared to defy him faced swift and brutal consequences, their deaths serving as a chilling reminder of his absolute power. The streets of Medellín became a battleground as rival gangs fought for control of the lucrative drug trade. Escobar's reign of terror cast a long shadow over Colombia. As his wealth and influence grew, so too did the violence that permeated every aspect of his empire. Bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings became commonplace, instilling fear and paranoia throughout the nation. Despite the bloodshed, Escobar cultivated a public image as a man of the people, a Robin Hood figure who used his ill-gotten gains to build schools, hospitals, and housing for the poor. This carefully crafted facade, however, could not conceal the brutal reality of his regime. The Colombian government, under immense pressure from the United States, finally moved to dismantle Escobar's empire. Escobar's rise from petty criminal to cocaine kingpin was nothing short of remarkable. His genius lay in his ability to build a vast, intricate network that stretched far beyond the borders of Colombia. Like an octopus, his organization had tentacles reaching across continents, infiltrating governments and corrupting officials with cold, hard cash. Every step of the cocaine pipeline, from the coca leaf to the addict's veins, had to be meticulously controlled. At the heart of this operation was his distribution network, a finely tuned machine built on a foundation of fear and loyalty. He cultivated relationships with corrupt officials, bribing them with staggering sums to turn a blind eye to his activities. Judges, politicians, and law enforcement officers lined their pockets with Escobar's money, becoming unwitting pawns in his deadly game. Those who couldn't be bought were often met with a swift and brutal end. The skies above the Caribbean became Escobar's personal highway. Fleets of small planes, often barely airworthy, ferried their illicit cargo from hidden jungle airstrips in Colombia to waiting buyers in the United States. To evade detection by radar, Escobar's pilots flew low and fast, hugging the contours of the waves or navigating through treacherous mountain passes. Their planes, often overloaded with cocaine, were flying bombs, but the allure of easy money and Escobar's ruthlessness kept them coming back for more. As the DEA and other law enforcement agencies tightened their grip on traditional smuggling routes, Escobar adapted with characteristic cunning. He experimented with submarines, speedboats, and even human mules, swallowing condoms filled with cocaine to transport his product. Escobar's ingenuity extended beyond simply finding new routes or faster planes. He invested heavily in developing innovative smuggling techniques, exploiting every loophole and vulnerability he could find. He employed skilled mechanics who could modify vehicles to create hidden compartments, concealing cocaine in gas tanks, spare tires, and even hollowed-out dashboards. His organization explored unconventional methods, dissolving cocaine in liquids like wine or shampoo, only to later extract it upon arrival. This constant innovation kept law enforcement agencies one step behind, struggling to keep pace with Escobar's ever-evolving tactics. Escobar understood that true power stemmed not just from control over the supply chain, but also from the hearts and minds of the people. He cultivated a complex web of loyalty and fear, rewarding those who served him while ruthlessly eliminating anyone who dared to betray him or challenge his authority. For the poorest residents of Medellín, Escobar represented a twisted form of hope. He invested some of his vast wealth in social programs, building housing, schools, and sports fields, earning him the nickname Robin Hood. This calculated generosity, however, came at a steep price. He demanded absolute loyalty, and his word was law. Those who dared to cross him, from rival drug lords to uncooperative politicians and journalists, met gruesome ends. As Escobar's cocaine empire flourished, so too did his ambition. He understood that true power extended beyond the drug trade, requiring him to diversify his portfolio and secure his position within Colombian society. His ill-gotten gains needed to be laundered, transformed from blood money into legitimate assets. Escobar invested heavily in legitimate businesses, acquiring hotels, restaurants, construction companies, and even a soccer team. These ventures served a dual purpose. They provided a front for laundering drug money and allowed him to project an image of a successful entrepreneur, a respected member of society. He craved legitimacy, seeking to shed the label of drug lord and embrace the mantle of a Colombian patriot. His investments, however, were often intertwined with his criminal activities. Construction projects became fronts for money laundering, while his soccer team, Atlético Nacional, was used to smuggle players and launder profits. Escobar's real estate acquisitions were vast and extravagant. He purchased sprawling haciendas, luxurious apartments, and entire city blocks, transforming the urban landscape of Medellín and beyond. His properties became symbols of his wealth and power, ostentatious displays of opulence that served as a constant reminder of his influence. One of his most notorious properties was the Hacienda Nápoles, a sprawling estate located northwest of Medellín. This complex featured a zoo with exotic animals, a private airstrip, and even a replica of a prehistoric dinosaur, a testament to Escobar's eccentric tastes and his desire to create a world unto himself. While some of these properties were used for personal enjoyment or as safe houses, many served a more strategic purpose.
Escobar's rise to power was fueled not only by his own ruthlessness and ambition, but also by the rampant corruption that plagued Colombian society.
He understood that true power lay not just in accumulating wealth, but in manipulating the very systems designed to uphold justice and maintain order.
He became a master puppeteer, pulling the strings of politicians, judges, and law enforcement officials, bending them to his will.
He bribed politicians to pass laws favorable to his operations, ensuring that his cocaine empire could flourish with minimal interference.
Judges were paid to dismiss charges against his associates or issue lenient sentences, rendering the justice system toothless in the face of his wealth and influence.
Police officers turned a blind eye to his activities, their loyalty bought with hefty bribes and the implicit threat of violence.
Escobar's influence extended to the highest levels of government.
Escobar, despite the brutality and corruption that defined his empire, craved acceptance, even admiration. He understood the power of public image and went to great lengths to cultivate a persona of a benevolent benefactor, a man of the people. He invested in social programs, built housing for the poor, and funded community projects, earning him the nickname Robin Hood among some segments of society. His generosity, however, was always calculated, a strategic investment designed to secure his power base and deflect attention from his criminal activities. He understood that a population living in fear was also a population easily manipulated. Escobar's attempts to whitewash his image extended beyond philanthropy. He sought to enter politics himself, even winning a seat in Congress. The 1980s in Colombia were a time of unprecedented violence and terror. Pablo Escobar, with his cocaine wealth and ruthless ambition, held the nation hostage.
His influence seeped into every facet of Colombian life, corrupting institutions, silencing opposition, and leaving a trail of blood and fear in its wake.
The Colombian government, caught in a deadly game, struggled to maintain order and protect its citizens from the seemingly unstoppable force of Escobar's Medellín cartel.
Escobar, determined to maintain his grip on power, declared war on the state itself. He unleashed a wave of violence that targeted not just rival drug traffickers, but also politicians, judges, journalists, and anyone who dared to oppose him. Car bombs exploded in crowded city centers, assassinations became commonplace, and the fear of reprisal hung heavy in the air, stifling dissent and paralyzing a nation. The Colombian people found themselves caught in the crossfire, their lives upended by the seemingly endless cycle of violence. The Colombian government, under intense pressure from the United States, which was grappling with its own cocaine epidemic fueled by Escobar's cartel, launched a full-scale offensive against the drug lord.
A special police unit trained and equipped by the U.S. was tasked with hunting down Escobar and dismantling his empire. The streets of Medellín became a battleground as the authorities clashed with Escobar's sicarios in a deadly game of cat and mouse.
Escobar, however, proved to be a cunning and resourceful adversary. He used his vast wealth to corrupt officials, infiltrate the police force, and even turn the local population against the authorities.
He placed bounties on the heads of policemen, offering rewards for their deaths, further fueling the cycle of violence and undermining the government's efforts to restore order.
As the war raged on, the Colombian people found themselves increasingly caught in the middle.
The shadow of fear cast by Pablo Escobar extended far beyond the battlefields of Medellín. His reign of terror had a profound impact on Colombian society, shaping the lives of its citizens and leaving an indelible mark on their collective psyche.
The constant threat of violence permeated everyday life, forcing people to alter their routines, censor their words, and live in a state of perpetual anxiety.
Parents were afraid to send their children to school, fearing kidnappings or attacks. Businesses operated under the constant threat of extortion, forced to pay protection money to Escobar's cartel or risk facing the consequences.
Journalists, judges, and politicians lived under constant threat, their lives in danger if they dared to speak out against Escobar or expose his crimes.
The fear instilled by Escobar was not limited to physical violence. He understood the power of psychological warfare, using threats, intimidation, and propaganda to control the narrative and maintain his grip on power.
He cultivated an image of himself as both a ruthless criminal and a benevolent benefactor, blurring the lines between good and evil and sowing confusion and doubt among the population.
By the early 1990s, the walls were closing in on Pablo Escobar. The relentless pressure from the Colombian government, backed by U.S. intelligence, was taking its toll.
The once invincible drug lord found himself increasingly isolated, his empire crumbling.
The man who had once seemed untouchable was now a fugitive, constantly on the move.
The Colombian government offered rewards for his capture, turning even those closest to him into threats. The walls were closing in, and the endgame was near for Pablo Escobar. The search block, driven by patriotism and a thirst for justice, became Escobar's worst nightmare.
They were relentless, utilizing cutting-edge technology and unconventional tactics. They infiltrated his network and turned his allies against him.
Escobar, once operating with impunity, found himself outmaneuvered. His safe houses were raided, his lieutenants captured. His fortune dwindled as authorities seized his assets. The man who seemed invincible was now on the run.
Despite the danger, the search block pressed on, each operation bringing them closer to capturing Escobar.
As Escobar's world closed in, paranoia and suspicion became his constant companions. He could no longer trust even his closest associates, fearing that any one of them could be an informant for the authorities, or worse yet, plotting to betray him for the substantial reward offered for his capture. The man who had once commanded absolute loyalty now found himself surrounded by enemies, both real and imagined.
Desperate to regain control and strike back at his enemies, Escobar unleashed a wave of violence that only served to further isolate him and turn public opinion firmly against him. Bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings became increasingly commonplace as he lashed out in a futile attempt to terrorize the nation into submission.
The violence backfired, however, only strengthening the resolve of the Colombian government and its allies to bring him to justice. The Colombian people, weary of the bloodshed and terror, turned against him, providing valuable information to the authorities and cheering on the search block as they closed in on their target.
Betrayal and desperation marked Escobar's final days, a stark contrast to the power and influence he once wielded.
On December 2, 1993, Pablo Escobar's reign of terror ended on a rooftop in Medellín. Betrayed by former allies and hunted by authorities, he was cornered and killed in a shootout.
Escobar's death was a victory for the Colombian government, but did little to quell the violence. His cartel splintered into rival factions, continuing the cycle of violence.
Escobar's legacy remains complex. He was a ruthless criminal and a folk hero to some. His story is a cautionary tale about power, greed, and the drug trade.
The end of Escobar's reign marked a new chapter in Colombia's history, haunted by his legacy.
Even in death, Pablo Escobar's presence looms large, haunting Medellín and the global drug trade he once dominated.
His story, a mix of ambition, violence, and fleeting generosity, continues to fascinate and repel.
The allure of Escobar's life speaks to our complex relationship with criminality and power.
From documentaries to TV series, Escobar's story is often romanticized for popular consumption.
These narratives risk glorifying his crimes and overlooking the devastating impact on Colombia. Beyond the romanticized narratives, Escobar's story offers a chilling glimpse into the inner workings of the drug trade and the human cost of this illicit business.
His empire, built on cocaine violence and corruption, serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences.
The demand for drugs, particularly in the United States and Europe, created the market that Escobar exploited.
Escobar's business acumen, while effective, was morally bankrupt.
He treated human life as a commodity, sacrificing countless individuals to maintain his power. Pablo Escobar's death did not mark the end of the drug trade.
If anything, it highlighted the Hydra-like nature of the illicit drug market.
As one head is severed, others emerge, eager to fill the void and capitalize on the seemingly insatiable demand.
The drug trade continues to thrive, evolving, adapting, and finding new routes to market despite the best efforts of law enforcement agencies around the world.
The fight against drug trafficking remains a complex and multifaceted challenge, requiring a multi-pronged approach that addresses supply, demand, and the underlying socio-economic factors that contribute to this illicit trade.
It necessitates international cooperation, effective law enforcement, and a commitment to tackling the root causes of drug abuse and trafficking.
Moreover, the legacy of Escobar's reign of terror continues to cast a shadow over Colombia.
While the country has made significant strides in recent years, the scars of violence, corruption, and social division remain.
It serves as a reminder of the enduring impact of such conflicts and the long and arduous process of healing and rebuilding. Pablo Escobar's story is ultimately a cautionary tale, a reminder of the seductive and destructive nature of unchecked power, the allure of easy wealth, and the devastating consequences of violence. It's a story that continues to resonate today, not just in Colombia but around the world, as we grapple with issues of drug trafficking, organized crime, and the complex interplay of poverty, inequality, and corruption. It's essential to move beyond the romanticized narratives and confront the harsh realities of Escobar's legacy. We must learn from the mistakes of the past, working towards a future where violence and exploitation are not seen as viable paths to power or prosperity. The fight for a more just and equitable world continues, and the story of Pablo Escobar, for all its darkness, can serve as a stark reminder of the importance of this ongoing struggle.